meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you're going to hear from men and women who've experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers or foster parents, or other people who are here to bring you hope and encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share with a friend. Remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, welcome, Darren. I am so excited to talk with you and to get to know you better and to have our listeners hear from you. And it is just always a huge privilege for me to talk with people like you who have personally walked through foster care and walked this journey. And so I just want to get right to your story. So let's go way back. What would you say are some of your earliest memories of childhood?
First, I want to say thank you for having me. It really is an honor, and I relish in the opportunity to be able to share my story. Um, I've kind of embraced it at 29 years old that it's not only for me, but I know it's going to free other kids, other youth, and just make a difference. Um, so, as back as I can remember, really was about 4 or 5. I literally remember going into the system
Hmm.
and when we were taken and the circumstances were foggy, but it's weird that at 20 something years old, everything started to click.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll explain a little bit of that later, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But 4 or 5 years old, I was taken away because of a fire that
Hmm.
happened in my house. And at that time, it was just my older sister, who was about 2 years older than me, and me. And there was a fire, and we were left alone a lot.
Hmm.
And reality is there was a fire, and the firefighters came and had to extract us from a house, and
Hmm.
then we went into the system. Then what I would learn later on is that I was the only one out of all of my siblings to actually continue in the system.
Oh, interesting.
My sister was told that we had different fathers.
Hmm.
So the grandmother went and got my sister out of foster care, but I had continued on to my journey.
Wow. When did you learn that?
I learned that I found my sister when I was 20 years old. And
Wow.
at the time, I had assumed that all of my siblings had gone into foster care because what I could remember was that it was me, I had an older sister,
Hmm.
and then I had a little brother. That's what I remembered. Since then, there was a couple of more that were
Hmm.
born after I was in the system from my mother, but I learned that at 20 years old. Once I found my sister, pretty much everyone came out of the woodworks.
So, how do you deal with that? Does that impact you as a 20-year-old to learn all of this and realize all these things you thought as a child was not the case?
Um, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was shattered.
Oh.
Like, I really went through a dark depression.
Mm.
Like, and when I say dark, I mean very dark. And I started drinking, um, trying to numb as people do.
Mhm.
They'll use
Mhm.
alcohol and other things. For me, it was alcohol, and it wasn't. I would drink to casually. It was I was going to get smashed or
Mhm.
as drunk as possible. But there was also an anger attached to that. So if you think of a drunk 20-year-old
Hmm.
um, who's angry, a lot of bad can happen from that.
Yeah. Man, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that you've had to walk through that but I believe from what we're gonna talk about today that God has redeemed a
Yeah.
lot of that, right?
Amen.
But it doesn't mean it's not a hard part of your story and painful, because it's real. So you said this fire was the catalyst really to your journey into foster care.
Mhm.
Um, what do you remember about that night?
I really don't. I remember the fire,
Mm,
and I remember being taken.
yeah,
Literally those 2 details
yeah.
separate. I didn't remember we were alone and all of that stuff. It wasn't until my sister kind of confirmed a lot of that stuff, and I honestly I grew up because I was in the system. I grew up thinking it was me that I had started that fire, and I
Mm,
don't even know where I put that piece that together, and then at 20, I found out that wasn't the case and stuff.
hmm. Wow, so that's a lot you were holding on to, I'm guessing. Did that impact the way you lived as a young child? Like, did you feel like guilt, like condemnation? What did you feel as you were growing up?
I mean, obviously, as a foster kid, you never feel good enough, especially when you've bounced around to different homes and locations. You never feel good enough. And even in that situation, I always envisioned when I met my biological mother that it did happen
Mm,
around this probably a year later,
mm,
um, that it would be some glorious climactic moment
mm.
that like I envisioned on TV or something.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. I really honestly grew up angry. Um, I struggled with authority. I struggled with trust. Um, yeah, I just struggled. It
Mm,
was a
yeah.
struggle to even gather and understand my emotions and what I was
Mhm.
feeling and how to articulate what I was feeling. That was always a struggle for me.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that, and I was guessing that it's not like you were able to say to the person you were living with, "Listen, I've experienced trauma, and my
Yeah.
trauma is reacting I'm reacting this way because of that." Like, you don't know, they don't know, and that's why so often kids who've experienced a lot of trauma get a really bad rap, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like you seem like the bad kids. But that's just not the case. The case is that you're struggling, you're trying to figure it out, you don't know how to respond. You need someone to come alongside you.
Mhm.
What were your foster parents like? It sounds like you had numerous?
Yeah, I had a couple temporary, I call them quick hitters because it
Mm,
was like I felt like I was going through the drive-through.
mm,
Um, and then I went to a residential in Yonkers, New
mm,
York, which is like in Westchester County. And I was there until I went to Rockland County, which is another part of New York. And it was probably like 20 minutes away. But for me, it felt like a world away because I have never
mm,
heard of it because I came
mm.
from the city. Um, and I had two families after that point. My first one was my foster family, and I was actually with them for 2 years.
Really?
For 2 years, up until I was 8 years old.
Hmm,
Um, and again, I struggled. I was hurt. I was a
yeah.
hurting kid.
Mm,
You know the saying, hurt people." And
mhm,
I guess people just failed to be able to understand a hurting child,
mm,
um, and how to deal with. And at a certain point, I went into a respite home for pretty much a summer
hmm.
until they decided that they no longer wanted to continue with my adoption process. And now
Ugh,
for me, that one probably hurt the most, and it's probably one I speak about the most because that was the longest home I was in.
hmm.
And I truly believed that that was my forever home.
Yeah. That was the 2 years? That was from
Yeah.
6 to 8, and they told you they were gonna adopt?
Yeah, that was the plan. That was the plan to adopt me.
Hmm,
And there's even redemption in that story too. Um, and how I met my father, which is the next family, they had attended the same church. So the family that I lived with, they went to a church, and my father, he went to that church as well, who would end up adopting me.
hmm,
And he also worked at the agency I was a part of.
hmm,
So they kind of always went to him when they had issues because he had boys of his own.
huh.
Yeah, he had 7 at the time, and he was a single man with
Oh
7
my.
kids. all males, most of them bigger than him. And I remember when I went to the office at Abbott House, um, they asked him to bring me to my next placement
Hmm.
because there was a connection at the church. The foster families were connected. I had built some type of cordial relationship with him. And at that point, I was in his office and he said, "Do you want to come live with me?" And I said, yeah, I know your son, so why not?"
Wow. Okay. So, first of all, back up just a little bit. I know you don't remember much about the night that you were removed. Do you remember? And so this might have been too close to remember, but do you remember what it was like entering that new home?
Which one is six?
The very first one, yeah.
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I remember so much so
Hmm.
that I remember the drive leaving. I remember when they were bringing me up from the school because the
Hmm.
school was on campus to the truck that my foster father was driving, or my new
Hmm.
foster father was driving. And I remember vividly a song that was playing as we crossed the bridge, and
Huh.
it's weird, and it's called I think it was "That Boy Is Mine" by Monica,
Huh.
and it's like a R&B song, and I don't know why I remember it so vividly, and it was a tape
Interesting.
cassette player,
Sure.
and it was just like it's like little things like that I
Hmm.
can't fathom, and I'm sure there's some psychological reason to why, because it was something new and it was a new
Mhm.
season. I was essentially entering into a new chapter. Um, so I remember that day, and like those are the most
Hmm.
vivid memories that I have going into that home. When I got there, there was another little boy my age,
Hmm.
and he was the best man at my wedding, and I'm the best man at his wedding
Oh,
coming up. So there
wow.
was
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot of redemption within
Huh.
that family, even though they didn't end up adopting me.
Hmm. That's awesome. Do you remember being just scared, confused? I mean, like, help us to understand the mind of a or were you 6-year-old?
Yeah,
Were you
6,
4? Yeah.
6.
6-year-old. Yeah.
The mindset was definitely scared.
Hmm.
It's almost like a numbing scared though, because it's like when you don't know what you're stepping into, it's like you don't
Mhm.
know, should I be scared? Should I be excited?
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of where I was. It's for me, I have already gone through a lot, even within the residential itself.
Mhm.
Because in the because I was abused
Mm.
sexually in the residential,
Oh my
and
goodness.
that was my first experience with that. So I was numb.
Oh my goodness.
There was a numbing, and you just didn't know what you were walking into. It was
Mm.
kind of just like, hey, you're going here. And again, and that's part of my issue with the system. A lot of times when we're moving kids, we feel like they're too young or they don't know what's best for them, so we're going to make all of these decisions.
Mm.
But reality is a lot of children, especially some of the older ones, are more in tune with their feelings than we realize.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel like I was never able to speak out about that because people really don't almost don't value
Hmm.
when a
Mm.
child is speaking because they want to discredit. They're quick to, oh no, he's probably making that up or stuff
Hmm.
like that. You know how many stories I've heard of children not being believed only to find out that it's true and it shouldn't be that.
Mm-mm.
So
Wow. Had you shared that with anyone? Did you even know how to share at 4 or 5 years old?
I'd never shared any of that.
Hmm.
Never until I did. I don't think I came to grips with that fully until my 20s.
Hmm. Wow. Um, your 20s, you had a lot coming at you. How have you processed? How has your journey of healing gone as an adult?
So it's funny. Obviously, my process of healing, being in the system, obviously, they put you in therapy. It's kind of one of the things you have to do.
Mm,
But like I remember and my therapist, I didn't feel could relate to me as
mm,
a 60-year-old Hasidic Jewish man.
mm,
That's the reality. I didn't feel like he could relate to a inner city kid who was just navigating the foster care system. Um, so for me, therapy was never for me. I didn't
mm,
really buy into it. Is it helpful? Yeah. Have I done it as a 25-year-old? Yes, I have. But for me at that time, I wasn't prepared to speak with someone that I didn't know.
yeah,
A lot of it, there has to be some level of trust before I can
yeah.
begin to speak about anything. So for me, if I'm completely honest about where I feel like my healing has come from, um, self reflection and trying to understand myself and
Mm,
studying people,
hmm,
like mannerisms. A lot of my work experience is in like the food industry and retail and stuff like that. So for me, it was part of, and I think it's an interest that I still have today, that I literally study people, what makes them tick, happy, sad, angry,
mm,
that kind of thing. And even TV shows, you can like reality
mhm,
TV shows, I would begin to study to understand people more. And
hmm,
that gave me a lot more insight to emotions,
mm,
to my emotions, what I was feeling, um, what triggers were for me. I literally had a conversation with my wife yesterday at how some of her hurts I've been able to connect for her in
hmm.
a way as if, and she's like, people actually go to school to be able to do this. And I don't know why I have that skill. And people do go to therapy to see how past hurts are
Mhm,
affecting their current life. And for me, it's kind of been that studying. And that's only half of it. For me, there's also my faith.
mm,
Um, I've been grounded in church and I was introduced into a Christian church since I was 6 years old. I
hmm,
wouldn't say I was a believer at that time because for me, I was a little bit too young and I was still holding on to hurts and stuff, but I got saved when I was 16 years old at a
mm,
youth retreat. Um, and really surrendering those hurts, letting go of those hurts, being vulnerable within those hurts,
mm,
um, and releasing those to the Lord and eventually people that I would build some type of trust with.
mhm. Wow. What are some memories from your journey that stand out to you that you feel like have, and it can be positive or difficult or hard ones, that you feel like have really shaped you along the way,
Memories that have shaped me.
or experiences, I guess might be a better word for it.
Well, my journey, first and foremost, has given me a love and a passion for foster youth. Um, Especially the older ones, because me and my
Mhm,
brothers, and there's nothing wrong with adopting or fostering babies and young children. There's a space for that. There's a need for that.
mhm,
There are a lot of moms who need that level of support. For me, I, me and all of my brothers, I think the youngest one, we did end up getting a baby, which was a sibling of two of my brothers, but
mm.
pretty much we all came in like 12 and older,
Wow.
and it was a zoo. That's the only way I could put it. It was a zoo. It was interesting. Um, but so my journey has given me a love for foster youth. Um, abuse, abuse. It's weird because I was abused multiple times, and it's made me the father I am in a
Hmm.
protective way. It, I wouldn't say it's always good. Sometimes I may teeter on the other end a little bit. But my journey and everything that I lacked, um, going through the foster care system has made me the father I believe that I
Hmm.
am today. The things that I needed, I feel I
Mm,
am. If I have any pride and joy, it's being a husband and being a father. So those two things um, are really important to me.
Yeah.
Um, what else has shaped me? I feel like not having a lot of people to support me in different ways has made me almost fatherly in nature,
Hmm.
because it's not only my family that I can be fatherly to. So I
Mm-hmm.
manage a Starbucks, and even in those connections, like I aim not to be people's parents, but my biggest mission as a manager personally, I definitely lead with compassion and empathy as long as we're making money. But I definitely lead from a place of, by the time you leave my store, I want you to have left a better person. And
Mm.
that can only happen from genuine connection. And there's definitely a fatherly aspect that I feel like I have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking to see how I can help people grow or facilitate their vision, their dreams, their goals. And essentially that's why I created a Foster's Hope, to really be able to begin to do that with foster youth, because a
Yeah.
lot of them don't have vision, because they don't believe in themselves.
Yeah. Because no one's showed them how to, right? No
Yeah,
one has believed in them for
there
them.
there's so many layers to it, and like I'm still in the process of getting 501(c)(3) status here in New York. It is hard to do anything in New York, but I've already have essentially programs that I want to do, but I pretty much call it 4E: encourage, empower, elevate, and educate. And the
Mm.
reason I call it that is because before we can try and build them up as far as skill sets and everything, we need to encourage them. We need to
Yeah.
empower them, to build them up. Um,
Hmm.
and luckily, I had a couple of those people, and that's another thing that kind of shaped me. Were some of the mentors that I was able to connect with, and some of them were people that I worked for, my bosses.
Hmm.
So
It is, I think our listeners need to hear this, that what was it in those mentors that what they do for you or with you, or why did they become so important and help you and shape who you are? Like, what was it about them?
consistency. There was a level of consistency that, and almost a openness, that I was able to make a mistake.
Mm,
I was able to be myself, authentically myself. I didn't have to create myself into a picture of what you felt I was supposed to look like within your family or your context or your organization or your church.
mhm,
And a lot of times that's what it was. I needed to fit into a mold that was painted for me as a foster child coming into your situation.
hmm,
But I was lucky enough to have mentors. Um, like for me, I think of Mike Leifer. He was a career mentor, because he took a chance on me as a 19-year-old who went from job to job before that, and believed in me and pushed me and helped mold me to think differently,
mm,
to dream bigger. Um, and I wasn't able to do that before. He gave me tools to succeed. Don't just tell me to succeed. How do I succeed?
mm,
Foster youth don't know how to be successful.
hmm,
Like we're in a system, a broken system. We don't have, I want to say, the people, because there's resources. There's
yeah,
stuff there. We're
yeah,
we're throwing money left and right, but it's not about those things. It's about the people who are running these programs. How are we attaching ourselves at the hip and walking with? Can you imagine being in relationship with someone and not walking with them, just trying to help them cast a goal or a vision, or believe something and be like, hey, that's where we're going, but I'm not going to start you on that journey. At some
mm,
point, you have to let us walk and go
mhm,
on, but we have to start that journey with them, especially foster youth, because there's a lot of brokenness there. There's a lot of
mhm,
disconnects. Um, there's a lot of lack of hope, lack
Mm,
of belief in oneself.
yeah. Hmm. And in the value that you are and that you bring, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm. Um, let's talk. You mentioned that you were adopted
Hmm.
into a family of, at that point, 7 boys,
Yeah.
right? And I know that this family has grown, I
Yes.
think 17
Yep.
siblings.
Yes. 17.
So you got to tell us about that and how, tell us about your family.
All right, cool. So I was I joined this family when I was 8. After that summer of doing respite, I was supposed to go to Poughkeepsie, New York, which was like hours away from where I currently was. I was like, "Oh Lord." Um, but then Jim Morris came and he had me in his office and he said, "Hey, do you want to come live with me?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" I would go to the same church. I know his sons. I would go to different school, but I was kind of used to that at that point.
Hmm,
Um, and then he would end up adopting me at 12,
hmm,
which is a whole nother thing. I moved into his house at 8 years old, and I was not adopted till 12. Why does it take so long? If we're trying to do right by children
mm,
and find them forever families, why does it take so long? I
yeah.
don't know. But nevertheless, so I was eventually adopted at 12. And for me at the time, I was like number 8. And the way my dad just didn't stop.
Hmm.
As we got older, he would push us on as normal children do. You grow up, you
Yeah.
grow old, and you move out, and you start to pave your own way. And my dad kept going, and now there's 17 of us. But there are 2 girls now. There's 2 girls. We eventually got some
2
girls.
girls.
My dad actually got married after I think 8. I think I was like 13 or 14 when he eventually got married. Um,
Wow.
then they got some more kids. But now he's in Texas and he's slowed down. This is the least amount of kids that he's had. I think he's down to 4 that are in the
Wow.
home
Man,
now.
he's such a slacker.
I know, like, how dare he think he can take a break as he gets older.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So, the oldest is what and the youngest is what? Do you
The
know?
oldest, what year are we in? That's how I know by the year. 2021.
2021.
So 41. My oldest brother is
Okay.
41, and the youngest is now 11. But when we got her, she was a newborn.
Wow.
Yeah, and she is the biological sibling of 2 of my brothers.
That is incredible. Wow. I thought we had a big family. I have 8 children,
Yeah,
but I obviously have more work to do.
gotta get some more.
Oh, man. Okay. So, at when you were in this family, how many kids were there at the same time? Like, who how many kids did you, like, kinda grow up with within the household?
So when I first went, I was the youngest,
Mhm.
and there were 7.
'Kay.
Well, I was 8, 7 or 8. Um, and then eventually I was the oldest, and they were 7 or 8.
Okay.
So it
So
was it
you
was like a
always
shift of 7
yeah.
in and out. Some would teeter back in for a little bit and then teeter back out, but you know how that goes with
Yeah.
kids and parents.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so tell us about who is in your family now?
My family, so I have a beautiful wife of 6 years,
Mm.
named Ariel, and I have 2 daughters, one daddy's girl
Ugh.
who's 5, her name is Jayliana. Then I have a year and 7-month-old daughter who is such a mommy's girl right now, but I know I'll flip that
You're
switch.
working on
I'm
her.
working on it.
Man, how has that been for you to build your own family? What has that been like?
It has been amazing, honestly, because it's like you either become what you've experienced or you become the opposite of.
Hmm.
And for me, I've always been driven to become the opposite of all of those things. So for me, I always knew I would be a good father. At the very least, I would be a good
Mm.
father.
Yeah.
Um, and not that there's not bumps in the road, and mind you, I don't think I've hit them yet because my daughters are 5, but when they're 16, I'm sure there'll be a couple. Um, And like I already talked about, I'm so protective already. See a little boy was wrestling my daughter for the soccer ball on her soccer team the other day, and I was like, I just looked at him. I was like, "Oh man, I have to stop. I have to stop. They're playing a game."
Oh, that's
But yeah,
awesome.
it really did shape me into
Mm,
a family-oriented person. And honestly, I
mhm,
think I got that from my dad who adopted me too.
mm. Wow, that's awesome. So you've already mentioned a little bit about your organization's 501(c)(3) that you're working on, but tell us more about your passion and like what fires you up.
As far as foster youth,
Whatever, wherever you want to take it, Darren.
so I mean, I'm a very passionate person. I have definitely a lot of things that I love. One of the things being music.
Mm.
Um, and I've actually created an LLC, a production company, as well here in New York. So I'm definitely busy. Um,
Yeah.
I manage a Starbucks, which I love people. Like I said, studying people, understanding people, and that
Mm.
job has really helped me to grow because
Yeah,
it,
I'm sure.
it almost ties into ministry. And we can say business and ministry is different, but there are a lot of key concepts,
Definitely.
mainly people. You have to
People.
manage
Yeah.
people. Um,
Imperfect people.
yeah, for sure.
They're in both.
Um, and then with a Foster's Hope, that started honestly with the intent of I'm going to create a social media platform,
Mm,
potential podcast for foster youth, 100% for foster youth, because I hear a lot of and see a lot of things for foster moms, foster parents, getting
mhm.
people to foster,
Yep.
which are all great things. But what about the foster youth? There's too many kids
Mhm.
that are aging out of
Yeah.
the system, um, just lacking in
Mhm.
skill sets and mindset and perspective and emotional intelligence. So for me, I wanted to pretty much share stories of myself and other people I
Mm.
knew. I mean, I have 17 brothers, so starting
Mhm.
there and really just
Yeah.
talk about success
Mm.
and how they can get there. And success isn't always, hey, I'm a millionaire.
Mhm.
Success is I'm healthy mentally, spiritually,
Yeah.
emotionally. I can provide for myself. I can provide for a family. I can create happiness. I can believe that I can have a home that feels like a
Mhm.
home
Yeah.
and be the creators of that. So for me, that's where a Foster's Hope started. And then I started doing things like school drives and that kind of thing, and trying to get resources for kids. And I was able to really tie in my job with that. And like
Mm.
my district manager has been so helpful and pretty much given me a green light. And last year,
Mm.
I had a school drive box in every Starbucks in
Oh,
Rockland
that's
and
so
some of
cool.
Westchester County. So it's like I'm kind of marrying the two, and I've just
Mm.
continued to do that. And as I've been doing that, I've been connected with some organizations, mainly with the one that I was actually a part of as a kid. I'm doing
Wow.
a lot of stuff with them. Right now, we're doing a bike drive and trying to get bikes for a group home. And I talked about how we recently went to Atlanta and
Mhm.
we went to an aquarium. I took my daughters to an aquarium and it was crazy because at some point during my trip, I realized, wait a minute, I've never done this as a child.
Mm.
So as
Hmm.
they were doing this, I was experiencing it. So it
Hmm.
was like, man, there's just so many kids that if you think of something like a bike, how
Right.
many kids have never owned a bike?
Yeah.
Or have never just been able to grab their bike and go riding through the neighborhood or whatever the case is. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, as I was doing that, some of the people that I'm surrounded with who are entrepreneurs and business owners and CPAs and stuff like that, and who sit on nonprofit boards have kind of pushed me to just start this
Hmm.
process and go for it because I love it. And at the end of the day, um, if I'm able to help 100 kids, I'm so content with that.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah.
do I hope that I can build some amazing, huge nonprofit? Yes, I do, because why create anything if you're not going to aim for excellence?
Sure.
Um, But at the end of the day, man, Jesus cared about the one
Mm-hmm.
so much so that he would leave the 99. So
Right.
for me, if my nonprofit can help just the one,
Mm.
then I'm willing to put in that effort to do so.
Yeah. Because you know firsthand
Mhm.
what it feels like to be the one.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so grateful for my father. And
Hmm.
it's crazy because I've actually, the last 2 days have been wild for me. And this is breaking news for you guys and for me.
Ooh.
I actually did an ancestry DNA thing, and I was matched with someone who shared this a lot of the same DNA. Like, I don't
Whoa.
know if you've ever done one of those things or seen
Mm-mm, I
them.
have not.
So pretty much what happens is you do a DNA thing, you send it in, they test it, then you get your results back. So I have an app, and it shows you DNA matches of other people who have done it from their database or whatever, and I matched with someone. There were others, first cousins, second cousins, third cousins,
Hmm.
fourth cousins, and it's like potential first, second, third based on how much DNA you
Okay.
shared.
Sure.
I had a bunch of second, third, fourth, and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, okay. But then there was one who says it's a 97% chance this person is a first cousin or an uncle.
Huh.
So I messaged this person to find out more. Long story short, that person is actually my uncle.
Ugh.
Secondly, through this, I was able to confirm who my biological father is,
Oh my goodness.
um, which is something I didn't know because I've always been given different answers from my biological mother.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I've had another gentleman who has always claimed to be my father, who I now know is actually not my father. So I've been
Whoa.
processing all of this stuff all because of ancestry DNA over the last 2 days. Um, and
You just learned a couple days ago that the guy you thought was your father is not your father.
yes,
Is that what you're
biologically
saying?
correct.
Biologically.
And then I
Whoa.
found out who actually is my father because the person I was connected to is his brother.
Oh my goodness. So now what?
Well, I it's funny because when I found my sister when I was 20 years old, a couple years later, her father died,
Hmm.
which is actually my father. So there's like it's
I
crazy. I actually went to that his funeral, but
Oh, and you didn't
at
know.
that time I didn't know because
Oh my.
everyone told us we had different fathers.
Oh
Um,
my.
it is
It's a
it.
lot to process,
Oh, I
man.
know it's wild, and like he has other kids, um, separate from me and my sister's mother. So like now I have a bunch of half brothers and sisters, or I'm
Mm.
like, and then there's another family who's not actually my family biologically. So it's like I've been going through some crazy stuff. All this to say, my best friend had asked me a question because I pretty much found out I grew up before I was adopted Darren Lopez.
Mm.
And then through all of this, the last 2 days, I pretty much found out that I should have been Darren Ayuso.
Hmm.
Um, so my best friend asked me, "Hey, would you ever change your last name back?"
Hmm.
And I told him flat out, "No, I would never do that to my father.
Hmm.
My father, to me, is the one who adopted me. Why? Because he saved my life.
Hmm.
To this day, I will always say that he saved my life.
Hmm.
Because if I look at some of my other siblings, who are males currently, are sitting in jail.
Hmm.
Um, and I firmly believe, had not my father stepped in and took a chance on me, that I would be dead or in jail as well. Um,
Hmm.
I was a bad kid going through the system.
Hmm.
Like I struggled. Like when I was a kid, I was kicked out of school after school after school. multiple schools every year, year after year. I was
Mm,
kicked out. So I can't imagine if I would have stayed in a environment like growing up in the city is tough. And like for me, I always like, why me? Why me, Lord? But what I found out when I was 20 was that I was set apart.
mm,
Like when think of my story, I think of the hand of God really just reaching in and grabbing me. No, I need you for something. And like I had to go through all of this, and even the last 2 days, I had to remember that because I started
mhm,
finding myself getting angry again. Because the more I found out,
mhm,
the more I got re-upset
mhm,
with my biological mother again.
mm,
And it's funny, I had just led worship a couple nights ago, and I was speaking about remembering
mm,
all that the Lord has done. And then literally a day later, I was failing to remember
mm.
why he had taken me out. And I was like, man, I was speaking to myself. What I was going to
Didn't
need,
even know.
what I was going to need 3 days later,
Yeah.
I was sharing on. Um, so my dad, man, he's one of the most important people to me, one of the most incredible people. Um, I really do believe I have the heart of my father
Mm,
because he wanted to make a difference in every child, and some that weren't even in our homes. The amount that he would again attach himself to a kid in need, and sometimes it wasn't even his own child, but he saw a need and constantly and listen. Sometimes he would bring them in to the house. They were going to stay here for a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so much so I don't know if I should say this on air, but so much so that it would like almost hurt the marriage because he was
mm,
constantly attaching himself
mm,
to children in need. And mind you, my parents are doing great. They're in Texas and stuff. Um, but that's the kind of person he was, and that's the kind of character trait that I feel like I've inherited
mm,
from him. And I try to just do my best to stand in the gap, man. There's a group of kids, of older kids that need people just as much as the younger ones. And a lot of people I always see, and I'm just talking about my sphere of influence,
mhm,
feel that if it's not fostering or adopting, we can't get involved. But you could I would be willing to say I would accept just having a mentor. Had I not been adopted, but I
mm,
had a mentor, I truly believe I would still be just as successful as I am today.
mm.
It's so vital. And
Yeah.
it's again, if you think about mentorship, how much time is really invested? It's not that much. Most
Mhm.
programs are talking about once a month, twice a
Yeah.
month, an hour, two. And mind you, I know good mentors, they'll put in a little bit more
More.
than that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But even then, 6 hours,
Mhm.
an hour a week, that's
Yeah.
4 hours to take a kid out and just love on him and push him and tell him when he's wrong. Like we
Mhm.
even need correction. But it starts with attaching ourselves.
Mm. Yeah. Man, it's so true, and no one's asking a mentor to have it all figured out.
No.
Just be
Yeah.
there, be available, share your life with another.
Be present. Be
Mhm.
consistent.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Be
worse than
real.
yeah, authentic.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than what?
There's nothing worse than someone who's inconsistent.
Hmm.
Because if you're there, not there, they're not there.
Mm.
And that's something that I grew up with.
Mm.
Inconsistency. Kids in the foster care system, what do they struggle with? Why do they struggle? Inconsistencies.
Mm.
You live here, now you live here. We're going to put you here. And again, it's a bunch of people making decisions that are best for kids
Mm.
without even gauging the kid.
Yeah. Praise the Lord that He is the ultimate consistent Father, always there. And he clearly has a plan for your life. I mean, not just now, has always. And I love the way you are stepping in and saying, I want to take what has happened to me and not just let that bury me, but I'm going to turn it around and help other people. That's what we're here for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, man. That's when we speak about healing, like it took so long for me to accept love from a person.
Mm,
That's something I've always struggled with. And even something now that I always not as heavy, um, but like if I would fall in some type of sin or just get into trouble, I had such a hard time believing that the
mm,
Father forgave me the way that the Bible says he forgives me.
mhm,
That he would love me in such a way, no matter how much I messed up, because all that I have known was predicated on the level of my behavior.
mm,
So it's like if I messed up, there was likelihood some repercussions that would alter where I was going next. So me and my faith, it took so much time, but once I came to the reality that there was a Father in heaven that loved me not based on conditions, not
mm.
based on whether I was hot or cold, but that would love me for me, who was always there, always consistent, always good. Um, Man, that was for me. That's where healing began,
Yeah.
because then I began to trust you with stuff. I began to trust the Lord with stuff, and I was able to give Him my stuff. Um,
Mhm.
like for me, like I said before, therapy wasn't it, but talking to the Father is greater than any therapy.
Yes. Yes. Man, amen to that. I have to ask you before we close out, if your dad was sitting right here with you, what would you say to him? What do you want to say to him?
My adopted dad or my biological father?
Your adoptive dad, Jim.
Jim. Um, Honestly, I would just say thank you for giving me a chance for seeing something inside of me that I never saw,
Mm,
for loving me even when it was hard to, for giving me a chance to have a healthy, beautiful family,
mm,
for taking the time to break down walls and chisel away at every layer. Thank you for reflecting the love of the Father.
mm,
Because one thing that I've always said to my father was that while your love is a little bit imperfect, we're human, he was the first reflection of a father who never wavered based on how I behaved.
mm.
Thank you.
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing your story, Darren. I think that God is going to use it not only on this podcast and for our listeners, but it's clear that God is working in you and through you. And I can't wait to see what happens next in your life.
Thank you so much. So appreciated, so honored, and so blessed.
Well, I hope today's episode was an encouragement to you wherever you are on this foster care journey. Now, we want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, we have a ton of great content for you over at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time.